The crystal towers of New Kepler gleamed under the pale blue sun, their surfaces catching and refracting light in patterns that would have been beautiful if anyone had been alive to see them. Ambassador Zekthara pressed her six-fingered hand against the reinforced viewing port of the emergency shelter, watching the distant spaceport burn. The acrid smell of melted metal and synthetic compounds filled the recycled air, making her respiratory slits flutter with distress. "How many ships do they have?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The translator collar around her neck rendered her words into standard galactic, though she doubted anyone would hear her over the constant rumble of explosions outside. Captain Veltar, the military attaché from the Centauri Defense Coalition, hunched over his tactical display. His normally pristine uniform hung in tatters, revealing patches of the blue-green skin beneath. Long-range sensors counted at least 40 vessels before they were destroyed. Could be more hiding behind the moon. Zekthara closed her eyes, trying to process the magnitude of their situation. 3 days ago, New Kepler had been a thriving diplomatic hub, home to over 2 million beings from dozens of species. Now, less than 1,000 survivors huddled in emergency shelters scattered across the planet's surface, waiting for rescue that might never come. The Vraktari invasion had been swift and merciless. Their dark ships had emerged from hyperspace without warning, jamming all communications and systematically destroying the orbital defense platforms. Within hours, they had established air superiority and began their systematic extermination of the civilian population. The Vraktari didn't take prisoners, they didn't need to. Their philosophy was simple: eliminate all non-Vraktari life wherever they found it. "Ma'am," a voice crackled through the comm system. It was Lieutenant Kress, one of the few surviving security officers. "We're picking up another wave of attack ships heading for the northern settlements. The Ilarian refugee camp is directly in their path." Zekthara's heart sank. The Ilarians were a peaceful species, barely beyond their industrial age when first contact had been established. They had come to New Kepler seeking sanctuary after their homeworld had been ravaged by a solar flare. Now they faced extinction at the hands of the Vraktari. "How long do we have?" she asked. 18 minutes, maybe 20. Captain Veltar looked up from his display, his large black eyes reflecting the emergency lighting. "The evacuation shuttles won't be ready for another hour. Even then, they can only carry 50 people each." The mathematics were cruel and simple. 3,000 Ilarians, 6 shuttles, and 18 minutes. Even if they could somehow get the shuttles airborne, the Vraktari interceptors would pick them off before they reached orbit. "There has to be something we can do," Zekthara said, pacing the small confines of the command center. "Some way to buy them time." "The emergency beacon," suggested Dr. Mordan, the station's chief scientist. He had been unusually quiet since the attack began, his normally animated tentacles hanging limp with exhaustion. "We could broadcast on all frequencies, send out a distress call. Maybe someone will answer." Veltar shook his head. "The nearest coalition fleet is 3 days away, minimum. And that's assuming they received our initial transmission before the communications array was destroyed." "Not the coalition," Dr. Mordan said, his voice taking on an urgent tone. "The emergency beacon uses quantum entanglement communication. It can reach anywhere in the galaxy instantaneously. The range is theoretically unlimited." Zekthara felt a flicker of hope. But who would answer? The other major powers are either too far away or don't have the resources to mount a rescue operation. "Anyone," Dr. Mordan said simply. "The beacon broadcasts on all known frequencies simultaneously. Every ship within 1,000 light-years will hear it. Every space station, every colony, every exploration vessel. Someone might be close enough to help." Captain Veltar frowned. "That could bring more trouble than help. Pirates, slavers, or worse. The galaxy is full of species that would see a distress call as an invitation to scavenge. We're already facing extinction," Zekthara pointed out. "How much worse could it get?" The question hung in the air as another explosion shook the shelter. Through the viewing port, she could see the glow of fires spreading across the city. The Vraktari were being thorough, burning everything they couldn't immediately destroy. "Do it," she decided. "Send the beacon." Broadcast everything: our location, the situation, the fact that we have civilians who need immediate evacuation. Maybe someone out there will have the decency to help. Dr. Mordan nodded and began working at his console. The quantum beacon is in the deep levels of the research facility. It survived the initial bombardment because it's hardened against electromagnetic interference. I can activate it remotely, but what? The signal will be incredibly powerful. Every ship, station, and receiver in 1,000 light-year radius will detect it. We'll be announcing our location to the entire galaxy. Zekthara looked out at the burning city again. In the distance, she could see the dark shapes of Vraktari ships moving across the sky like mechanical vultures. The alternative is watching everyone die in silence. Activating beacon, Dr. Mordan announced. His tentacles moved across the control surface with practiced efficiency. Quantum entanglement field stabilizing, signal strength at maximum, broadcasting on all frequencies. The console chirped softly, and a holographic display showed the beacon's transmission spreading outward from New Kepler like ripples in a pond. Within seconds, it would reach every corner of the galaxy. What exactly are we telling them? Veltar asked. Dr. Mordan read from his display. Standard distress protocol. Species identification, location, nature of the emergency, and request for immediate assistance. The beacon also includes our basic biological requirements: atmosphere, temperature, gravity, in case potential rescuers need to prepare life support. And if the Vraktari detect the transmission? They're too busy killing civilians to worry about communications, Zekthara said bitterly. Besides, they already know where we are. The next few minutes passed in tense silence. The beacon continued its transmission, sending their desperate plea into the void. Outside, the sounds of destruction grew closer. The Vraktari were methodically working their way through the city, eliminating any remaining pockets of resistance. Ma'am, Lieutenant Cress's voice crackled through the comm again. We're getting reports from the northern settlements. The Vraktari have reached the Ilarian camp. They're not taking prisoners. Zekthara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 3,000 lives pressing down on her. She had been a diplomat for over 30 years, dedicated to building bridges between species and fostering peaceful cooperation. Now she was watching helplessly as an entire civilization was wiped out. Any response to the beacon? She asked. Dr. Mordan shook his head. Nothing yet. But quantum communication is instantaneous only for the transmission. Response time depends on how far away potential rescuers are, and how quickly they can mobilize. How long should we wait? Unknown. Could be minutes, could be hours. Could be. The scientist's words were cut off by a new sound from outside, a low, rumbling roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the shelter. Zekthara pressed her face to the viewing port, trying to identify the source. What was that? Veltar asked, checking his tactical display. I don't know, Cress replied over the comm. Our sensors are picking up massive energy signatures in the upper atmosphere. Something big is coming through hyperspace. The roar grew louder, accompanied by brilliant flashes of light that illuminated the smoke-filled sky. Zekthara watched in amazement as tears began to appear in the fabric of space itself, glowing rifts that expanded rapidly. Multiple hyperspace emergence events, Dr. Mordan announced, his voice filled with awe. I'm counting, 12, 15, 20 separate signatures. These ships are enormous. Through the viewing port, Zekthara could see the first vessel emerging from hyperspace. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, a massive wedge-shaped craft that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The ship's hull was a dark gray-black, covered in what looked like armor plating. Gun ports and sensor arrays bristled along its length like the spines of some predatory creature. Dear spirits, Veltar breathed. That ship is over 2 kilometers long. More vessels emerged from hyperspace, each one larger and more menacing than the last. They moved with a predatory grace that spoke of advanced technology and military precision. Whatever species had built these ships, they were clearly designed for one purpose: war. Are they responding to our beacon? Zekthara asked. Unknown, Dr. Mordan replied. But the timing is suspicious. These ships arrived less than 15 minutes after we began broadcasting. That's impossible, Veltar said. Even with the fastest hyperspace drives, it would take hours to reach us from the nearest major system. Unless they were already close, Zekthara realized. Maybe they were in the outer system when the beacon activated. The implications were troubling. If these ships had been lurking in the outer reaches of the new Kepler system, what had they been waiting for? And why hadn't they intervened when the Vraktari attacked? Ma'am, Cress's voice was tight with tension. The Vraktari are reacting to the new arrivals. They're pulling back from the planet's surface and forming a defensive formation in orbit. Through the viewing port, Zekthara could see the Vraktari ships rising from the planet's surface like a swarm of angry insects. Their sleek, predatory forms moved with the fluid grace of natural hunters, but there was something different about their movements now. They seemed cautious. How many Vraktari ships are there? She asked. 43 confirmed, Veltar replied. All combat vessels, ranging from light cruisers to battleships. And the newcomers? Still emerging from hyperspace. Current count is 37 vessels. Wait, make that 41. No, 46. They're still coming. The Dark Fleet continued to materialize, their massive forms blotting out the stars. Each ship was unique in design, but they all shared the same predatory aesthetic: angular hulls, heavy armor, and an abundance of weapons systems. These were not exploration vessels or diplomatic ships. These were instruments of war. I'm getting energy readings from the unknown fleet, Dr. Mordan announced. They're powering up weapons systems. All of them. And the Vraktari? Same thing. Both fleets are preparing for battle. Zekthara felt a chill run down her spine. The Vraktari were vicious, but they weren't stupid. They had built their empire through careful calculation and overwhelming force. If they were preparing to fight these newcomers, it meant they saw them as a legitimate threat. Try to establish communication, she ordered. With both fleets. Maybe we can prevent this from escalating. Ma'am, Cress interrupted, we're getting a transmission from the Vraktari flagship. It's not what you'd expect. Put it through. The comm system crackled to life, and a harsh, guttural voice filled the command center. The translator caller struggled to render the Vraktari language into standard galactic, but the message was clear enough. Unknown vessels, this is War Commander Thakvor of the Vraktari Empire. You are interfering with a lawful conquest. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. There was a pause, then a new voice responded. This one was different, deeper, more resonant, with an undertone that seemed to vibrate through the shelter's hull. Vraktari vessel, this is Captain Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Federation Navy. We have received a distress call from the planet below. You will cease your attack and withdraw from this system immediately. The silence that followed was deafening. Zekthara felt her heart skip a beat. Terran Federation? She had never heard of such a government. The galactic databases contained records of thousands of species and hundreds of interstellar nations, but the Terran Federation was not among them. Negative, Thakvor responded. This world is claimed by the Vraktari Empire. We will not be deterred by threats from an unknown species. This is not a threat, Captain Mitchell replied, her voice carrying a note of barely controlled anger. This is a statement of fact. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawing your forces. You dare issue ultimatums to the Vraktari Empire? Thakbor's voice rose to a roar. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. We have exterminated species that had mastered the stars before your ancestors learned to make fire. You will learn to fear the name Vraktari. 20 seconds. The calm certainty in Captain Mitchell's voice was more terrifying than any threat. Zekthara had dealt with enough military officers to recognize the tone of someone who had already made a decision and was simply going through the motions of diplomacy. All ships, attack formation. Thakvor commanded. Destroy these upstart aliens. The Vraktari fleet moved with practiced efficiency, their ships spreading out in a classic attack formation. They had used this same tactic to crush the defenses of dozens of worlds. The smaller vessels moved to flank the enemy while the larger ships prepared to deliver devastating broadsides. "Time's up," Captain Mitchell announced. What happened next defied everything Zekthera knew about space combat. The Terran ships didn't move into formation or maneuver for advantage. Instead, they simply opened fire. The darkness of space erupted in brilliant flashes of light as the Terran weapons spoke. But these weren't the familiar energy beams or plasma bolts used by most species. These were something else entirely, streams of coherent light that seemed to tear through space itself, followed by what looked like solid projectiles moving at impossible speeds. "Kinetic weapons," Dr. Mordan breathed. "They're using kinetic weapons at relativistic velocities." The first Fractari ship to be hit, a heavy cruiser, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next it was an expanding cloud of superheated gas and debris. The kinetic projectile had struck with such force that it had converted the ship's mass into pure energy. "Impossible," Veltar whispered. "No one uses kinetic weapons in space combat. The targeting requirements alone." His words were cut off as another Vractari ship exploded, then another. The Terran ships were firing with mathematical precision, their weapons finding their targets despite the massive distances involved. Each shot was a perfect hit, each hit was a kill. "Return fire." Thakvor screamed over the comb, "All ships, concentrate fire on the largest vessel." The Vractari fleet responded with a volley of plasma bolts and particle beams, their weapons lighting up the darkness like a deadly aurora. The beams converged on the largest Terran ship, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed even the Vractari flagship. The energy weapons struck the Terran ship's hull, and simply disappeared. The beams were absorbed by what looked like a shimmering energy field surrounding the vessel. "Deflector shields," Zekthera realized. "But they're not reflecting the energy, they're absorbing it." "Adaptive shielding," Dr. Mordan added. "The field is analyzing the incoming weapons and adjusting its frequency to negate them." "I've never seen anything like it." The Terran ships continued their methodical destruction of the Vractari fleet. Their weapons seemed to have unlimited range and perfect accuracy. Ships that tried to flee were cut down before they could reach the edge of the system. Those that stood and fought lasted only seconds longer. "War Commander," one of the Vractari captains transmitted, his voice tight with fear. "We're taking heavy casualties. Request permission to withdraw." "Negative." Thakvor roared. "The Vractari Empire does not retreat. Fight to the last ship." But even as he spoke, his own flagship was bracketed by Terran weapons fire. The massive battleship's shields flared and died under the assault, its hull rupturing in dozen places. Atmosphere vented into space in glowing streamers. "This is War Commander Thakvor," the Vractari leader transmitted, his voice now barely above a whisper. "To whoever finds this record, beware the Terrans. They are not like the other species. They are death itself." The transmission ended in a burst of static as the Vractari flagship exploded. In less than 20 minutes, the entire Vractari fleet had been destroyed. 43 ships, reduced to debris and radiation. The Terran fleet hung in space above New Kepler, their dark hulls unmarked by the battle. "Dear spirits," Veltar breathed. "What are these Terrans?" Before anyone could answer, the calm system activated again. Captain Mitchell's voice filled the command center, but now it carried a different tone, gentle, almost apologetic. "New Kepler Command, this is Captain Sarah Mitchell. We received your distress call and responded as quickly as possible. I'm sorry we couldn't arrive sooner. What's your current status?" Zekthera stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what she had just witnessed. The same beings who had just annihilated an entire fleet in minutes were now offering help with the courtesy of a neighbor asking to borrow a cup of sugar. "Captain Mitchell," she finally managed, "this is Ambassador Zekthera of the Galactic Council. We have survivors scattered across the planet. Many are wounded and in need of medical attention. The Vractari destroyed most of our infrastructure." "Understood, Ambassador. We're scanning the planet now and have located your survivor groups. We'll begin evacuation procedures immediately." Do you have any specific medical requirements we should be aware of? The beacon included our basic biological data, Dr. Mordan interjected. But we have over 20 different species down here, each with their own needs. No problem. We'll adjust accordingly. Can you provide us with a secure landing zone? We'd like to set up a field hospital and evacuation center. Zekthara looked at her companions, seeing her own confusion reflected in their faces. These Terrans had just demonstrated the ability to destroy an entire fleet without suffering a single casualty, and now they were offering medical assistance like it was the most natural thing in the world. There's a clear area about 2 kilometers north of the main city, she said. It should be large enough for your shuttles. Thank you. We'll have medical teams on the ground within the hour. Is there anything else you need immediately? Food, water, shelter, Veltar said. Most of our supplies were destroyed in the initial attack. We'll take care of it. Oh, an ambassador? You might want to prepare your people for what they're about to see. We know our appearance can be unsettling to some species. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Outside, the first Terran ships were beginning to descend through the atmosphere, their hulls glowing with the heat of atmospheric entry. What do you think she meant about their appearance? Kress asked over the comb. I don't know, Zekthara replied, watching the approaching ships. But after what we just witnessed, I'm not sure I want to find out. The first Terran shuttle touched down in the designated landing zone exactly 1 hour later. It was a sleek, angular craft that looked more like a weapon than a transport. As the landing ramp descended, Zekthara and her companions watched from the shelter's viewing port. The first figure to emerge was clearly the shuttle's pilot, a tall, bipedal creature wearing some kind of environmental suit. But as more figures followed, Zekthara realized they weren't wearing suits at all. The smooth, form-fitting garments were their natural skin. They're wearing some kind of personal armor, Dr. Mordan observed. But it's integrated with their clothing somehow. Very advanced. The Terrans moved with fluid grace, their movements economical and purposeful. They began unloading equipment from the shuttle, medical supplies, portable shelters, and devices that Zekthara couldn't identify. Everything was handled with military precision, but there was something else in their movements. Something that made her instinctively step back from the viewing port. They move like predators, Veltar said quietly. Look at the way they scan their surroundings, the way they position themselves for mutual support. These are natural hunters. One of the Terrans removed her helmet, revealing the face beneath. Zekthara gasped. The being was humanoid, but her features were sharp and angular. Most disturbing were her eyes. They were forward-facing, designed for binocular vision and depth perception. The eyes of a predator. That's Captain Mitchell, Dr. Mordan said, checking his scanner. She's broadcasting on standard diplomatic frequencies, requesting permission to approach our shelter. Let her come, Zekthara decided. But keep the security doors sealed until we know more about their intentions. Captain Mitchell approached the shelter alone, her hands visible and empty. She stopped just outside the entrance and spoke directly to the external comm pickup. Ambassador Zekthara, I'm Captain Sarah Mitchell of the TFS Retribution. May I come in? I'd like to discuss evacuation procedures and coordinate relief efforts. Her voice was calm and professional, but there was an underlying strength that reminded Zekthara of the way she had spoken to the Vraktari commander. This was not a being to be trifled with. Come in, Captain, Zekthara replied, activating the door controls. The security doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Captain Mitchell stepped inside. She was taller than Zekthara had expected, nearly 2 meters in height, with broad shoulders and a muscular build. Her uniform was a deep blue-black, with rank insignia that seemed to be integrated into the fabric itself. Ambassador, she said, offering what appeared to be a gesture of greeting. I'm sorry we couldn't arrive sooner. How many casualties are we looking at? We don't have exact figures yet, Zekthara replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The Vraktari were very thorough. Out of a population of over 2 million, we estimate less than 50,000 survivors. Captain Mitchell's expression darkened. I see. We'll do everything we can for the survivors. My medical teams are already setting up triage centers at the major survivor locations. We should have everyone evacuated within 48 hours. Evacuated to where? Veltar asked. We have several hospital ships in the fleet, Mitchell replied. They can provide medical care and temporary housing while we arrange for permanent relocation. Do you have any preferences for destination? The Galactic Council will need to be notified, Zekthara said. This was a council world, after all. There will be investigations, inquiries. Of course. We'll make sure all proper protocols are followed. In the meantime, is there anything else you need? Dr. Mordan spoke up. Captain, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly is the Terran Federation? I've never heard of your government before. Captain Mitchell paused, seeming to consider her words carefully. That's complicated. We're relatively new to interstellar politics. This is actually our first major contact with the galactic community. First contact? Zekthara felt her heart skip a beat. But your ships, your technology, you have faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, medical capabilities that rival the most advanced species in the galaxy. How is this your first contact? Like I said, it's complicated. Mitchell's expression was carefully neutral. We've been aware of the galactic community for some time, but we've preferred to observe rather than participate. Your distress call was the first time we felt compelled to intervene. You were observing? Veltar's voice carried a note of accusation. You knew about the Vraktari attacks and did nothing? We weren't in a position to act, Mitchell replied. Our ships were on the far side of the system when the attack began. By the time we received your distress call and could respond, the initial assault was already over. It was a reasonable explanation, but something about it didn't sit right with Zekthara. The Terrans had responded to the beacon transmission with impossible speed, and their ships had been perfectly positioned to intercept the Vraktari fleet. Either they had been incredibly lucky, or there was more to their story. Captain, she said carefully, your ships destroyed an entire Vraktari fleet in a matter of minutes. The Vraktari Empire is one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. How were you able to defeat them so easily? Mitchell's expression grew cold. The Vraktari were attacking civilians. Innocent people who posed no threat to anyone. In our culture, such behavior is considered deeply offensive. But your weapons, your tactics, are effective against those who prey on the weak, Mitchell finished. Ambassador, with respect, I didn't come here to discuss military strategy. I came to help your people. Can we focus on that? The rebuke was gentle but firm. Zekthara nodded, recognizing that she had pushed too hard. Whatever the Terrans were hiding, they had saved her people from extinction. That was what mattered. Of course, Captain. What do you need from us? A complete list of survivors and their locations. Medical information for the wounded. And any cultural or religious considerations we should be aware of during the evacuation. I'll have Dr. Mordan compile that information for you, Zekthara said. But Captain, I have to ask, what happens after the evacuation? The Vraktari Empire won't simply accept the destruction of an entire fleet. They'll want revenge. Mitchell's smile was cold and predatory. Let them come. We'll be ready. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity. The Terrans proved to be as efficient at rescue operations as they were at combat. Their medical teams worked tirelessly, treating wounded civilians and coordinating evacuations with military precision. Their equipment was advanced beyond anything Zekthara had seen, capable of treating injuries that would have been fatal with conventional medicine. But it was the Terrans themselves that fascinated and disturbed her. They were clearly a military species, every movement precise and purposeful. They spoke in clipped, efficient sentences and seemed to possess an almost supernatural awareness of their surroundings. Even their medical personnel carried weapons and moved with the fluid grace of trained soldiers. They're not just military, Dr. Mordan observed as they watched a Terran medic treat a wounded Ilarian child. They're apex predators. Every single one of them. What do you mean? Zekthara asked. Look at their biology. Forward-facing eyes for depth perception and target acquisition. Powerful musculature for speed and strength. Dense bone structure to withstand impact. They're built for hunting and killing. But they're helping us, Veltar pointed out. They've shown nothing but kindness to the civilians. Yes, but look at how they interact with each other. They have a clear hierarchy, perfect coordination, and they communicate through subtle signals we can barely detect. They're a pack species, evolved for group hunting. Zekthara watched the Terran medic gently bandage the child's arm, speaking in soft, reassuring tones. The contrast between the being's predatory nature and compassionate behavior was unsettling. Ma'am, Cress interrupted her thoughts, we're getting a transmission from the Galactic Council. They're requesting immediate communication. Put them through, Zekthara said, settling into her chair. The holographic display activated, showing the familiar figure of Council Prime Janice. The elderly Eltarian's usually calm demeanor was replaced by barely controlled panic. Ambassador Zekthara, thank the ancestors you're alive. We received fragments of your distress call before all communications went dark. What's your situation? We're secure, Prime. The Vraktari fleet has been destroyed, and we're evacuating the survivors. Destroyed? How? Our intelligence reports indicated they had over 40 ships. We had help. An unknown species calling themselves the Terran Federation responded to our distress call. Prime Janice's expression grew troubled. Terran Federation? We have no record of such a government. Can you describe these beings? Humanoid, bipedal, clearly evolved from predator stock. Their technology is centuries ahead of anything we've encountered. They destroyed the entire Vraktari fleet in less than 20 minutes. Impossible. The Vraktari have some of the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. I saw it with my own eyes, Prime. These Terrans, they're unlike anything we've dealt with before. Their weapons, their ships, their capabilities, they're on a completely different level. Prime Janice was quiet for a long moment. Ambassador, the Council has been aware of certain anomalies in the Outer Rim systems. Strange energy signatures, unexplained disappearances of exploration vessels. There have been theories about an unknown species operating in the galactic periphery. You think these Terrans are responsible? I don't know. But if they have the capability to destroy a Vraktari fleet single-handedly, they represent either the greatest hope or the greatest threat the galaxy has ever seen. The transmission was interrupted by an alert from the shelter's sensors. Ma'am, Cress announced, we're detecting multiple hyperspace emergence events. Large vessels, similar to the Terran fleet. Through the viewing port, Zekthara could see new ships materializing in orbit. But these weren't the sleek, predatory vessels of the Terran fleet. These were massive, blocky constructs that looked more like mobile fortresses than starships. That's a Vraktari battle group, Veltar said, his voice tight with fear. At least 60 ships, including several dreadnoughts. How is that possible? Dr. Mordan asked. We destroyed their entire fleet. That was just the advance force, Captain Mitchell's voice came through the comm system. The main Vraktari fleet was always going to follow up. We've been monitoring their communications. Captain, Zekthara said, there are over 60 ships out there. Can you handle them? We'll manage. But I need you to expedite the evacuation. Things are about to get very unpleasant up here. Through the viewing port, Zekthara could see the two fleets positioning themselves for battle. The Vraktari had learned from their previous encounter and were approaching more cautiously, their ships spread out in a loose formation designed to minimize losses from area effect weapons. Unknown vessels, a new voice boomed through the comm system. This is Fleet Admiral Kroktesh of the Vraktari Empire. You have committed an act of war against the Empire by destroying our ships and interfering with our conquest. Surrender now and we will grant you a quick death. Fleet Admiral, Captain Mitchell replied, her voice calm as ever, this is Captain Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Federation Navy. You have exactly one opportunity to withdraw from this system. I suggest you take it. You destroyed 43 ships with a surprise attack, Kroktesh snarled. You will not find us so easy to defeat this time. We have studied your weapons, analyzed your tactics. You are not gods, merely another species with advanced technology. As you wish. The second battle was different from the first. The Vraktari had indeed learned from their previous encounter, employing long-range weapons and evasive maneuvers. Their ships moved in coordinated patterns, using covering fire and electronic countermeasures to protect each other. For a moment, it seemed like their tactics might work. The Terran ships were forced to maneuver more actively, their perfect accuracy disrupted by the Vraktari's defensive formations. But then the Terrans adapted. They're changing their weapon frequencies, Dr. Mordan reported, watching the battle through the sensor feed. And their targeting systems are compensating for the Vraktari evasion patterns. The tide of battle shifted dramatically. The Terran ships began firing in coordinated volleys, their weapons synchronized to overwhelm the Vraktari defenses. Ships that had survived the initial exchange were systematically hunted down and destroyed. Impossible, Kroktesh transmitted, his voice filled with disbelief. Our shields are rated for Class X energy weapons. Your projectiles shouldn't be able to penetrate them. Your shields are designed to stop energy weapons, Mitchell replied. Our kinetic rounds are accelerated to 90% of light speed. At that velocity, they carry enough energy to crack a planet. What are you? Kroktesh whispered. We're humans, Mitchell said simply. And we really don't like bullies. The battle ended even more decisively than the first. The Vraktari fleet was completely destroyed, with no survivors. The Terran ships hung in space, their dark hulls unmarked by the encounter. Ambassador, Captain Mitchell's voice came through the calm, we've completed the evacuation of all survivor sites. Everyone is aboard our hospital ships and receiving medical care. We're ready to transport them to whatever destination you prefer.